Hello everyone, welcome to another video of Into the Hive Mind. Today I just wanted to basically go over the new Warzone Octarius that's coming out in the Christmas White Dwarf for Tyranids. This is the Army of Renown Crusher Stampede that is coming out. So again, just a recap on that, it is a pure monster mash list that prevents you from bringing any models that have 2 or less on their wounds characteristic. So you can only bring warriors, Hyde Guard, lictors, those 3 wound infantry models, or monsters, essentially. But the benefit that you get for this is army-wide 5+ invulnerable save. All of your monsters get -1 damage, and also count as the number of wounds they have remaining for the number of models that they are on an objective. So a Mollock that has a wound characteristic of 12 would be able to count as 12 models on a objective when it shows up, which is phenomenal and is absolutely necessary to make these lists work. That otherwise, with not being able to have swarms like you normally would, that is the other restriction. You can't take like rippers or sky slashers. You are not allowed to bring swarms in this list either. But yeah, without having those swarms or those hordes of gaunts or gene stealers to basically hold objectives, being able to count as multiple models with all of your monsters is amazing, and again, very necessary with the way you have to build this list. So anyways, I just wanted to start off with making some corrections to my last video, as before I made the video going over all the new stuff based off of what was said again in the Twisted Dice video that was reviewing it, and I had not actually seen the rules for myself. Now I have, so a few corrections that I made, or that I need to make, is the psychic powers. Infused energies is a psychic power that basically gives you reroll all hit rolls in the fight phase, and that's amazing. And I talked about a combo of doing that with like a flyer int that has exploding 6s. Unfortunately, it cannot target synapse creatures, which makes it considerably worse, as most things that you want to be giving full rerolls to are synapse creatures. The few models that this is really good on is a Haruspex, or even the guys, basically anything that hits on 4s or and then can degrade to worse. You absolutely want this for. But like our Hive Tyrants and our Hierodules, most of them are all hitting on 2s or 3s, re-rolling 1s. So the full re-rolls isn't nearly as impactful. Next correction, to the Warlord traits, I was talking about Rampaging Beast, which gives you D3 extra attacks. I was unsure on if this was once per game, which is what Aceface had said in his video, but in the comments it said it was not once per game. It is once per turn. So if you were to fight twice, you can get D3 extra attacks on one of those. But otherwise, it's basically D3 extra attacks. In a few situations, you won't get the D3 all the time, as it is just once per turn. Other corrections to stratagems. There's actually 2 stratagems that I just completely missed that were not talked about. There is a stratagem called Thunderous Impact, which costs 2 CP, and you give it to one of your monsters, and they get +1 to hit, +1 to wound, and +1 damage if they put all of their attacks into an enemy monster or vehicle unit. So all your attacks have to go into that one unit, but if you do that and spend 2 CP, you get +1 to hit, wound, and damage. This should be amazing, and it's weird because it's just kind of not. Most of the time, the +1 to hit is, again, our guys are hitting on 2s and like re-rolling, so actually doesn't matter that much. +1 to wound is really good, and +1 damage should be really good, but most of our stuff we've kitted out to be 4 flat damage or D3 +3, and that extra bit doesn't go as far as you would think because of our limited number of attacks. Still a really good stratagem, just not as good as you would initially think, hearing being able to give something +1 to hit, wound, and damage. Sounds like it would be. Another stratagem that I did not know about is called Terrifying Charge. It is 1 CP and is used in the beginning of the morale phase. What this does is you pick an enemy unit that is in engagement range of one of your monsters, and it gets -3 to its leadership right before it rolls morale. So leadership shenanigans have not really been very good in the game, but -3 is a lot. And if you were to combine that with the Warlord trait that's -1 leadership and -1 to combat attrition in a 3-inch bubble, and suddenly you're, say, a flying Hive Tyrant charges, kills 2 or 3 guys, he'll probably kill more, but even if he only kills 2 or 3 guys from a unit, they're suddenly taking a leadership check at -4, and if they're below half strength, then the rest of the squad runs away on 1s, 2s, and 3s, which could be really good. I don't know if it's worth trying to tech into that, because so many armies just ignore morale, but you can at least make them spend CP to be fearless. So kind of a cool stratagem. Might actually have some play with leadership shenanigans, which so far have not proven to be able to do anything. Some other corrections to stratagems. The transhuman stratagem, which is Unyielding Chitin. It's 1 CP and can be used on infantry squads. I was unaware if it could be used on infantry squads or not. It can be. It's 1 CP for infantry squads of 4 or less models. If your unit has 5 or more models, it's 2 CP to give them the transhuman. Again, I don't know how worth it is. Like, it sounds really good, but most of our guys are wounded on 3s. Our like Hyde Guard are wounded on our T5, so they'll be wounded on 3s. Warriors are T4. So the transhuman is decent on the infantry, but 2 CP is a lot for your Hyde Guard, and 1 CP on like a 4-man warrior squad is probably the only time I'd really be using it. Just because, again, all these stratagems are amazing. It's just now that's what Tyranids have. We are so chock full of amazing stratagems that we're going to burn through all our CP turn 1 or 2. I mean, we've already been doing that, and now it's just packed even more. So saving CP for the absolute max benefit actually becomes very essential with these lists and this new army. So the transhumans, it's good, but situational. The other stratagem I need to correct is Breaking Through. That is the absolutely incredible stratagem of basically do 6 mortal wounds when you charge, is what it should say, because that's basically what it turns into. It's 1 CP, and when you charge, you roll a number of dice equal to the number of wounds you have remaining. So most of the time, this is going to be like 10 plus dice, and on a 4+, you do a mortal wound. You get +1 to this roll if your strength is higher than the enemy's toughness, and you get -1 to this roll if your strength is less than the enemy's toughness. So, even your strength 6 guys, like say a Flyrant charges a Rhino, even though you're strength 6 and you're wounding on 5s, you still get to roll 12 dice with your Flyrant and do 4 mortal wounds on average for 1 CP is crazy good. And yeah, you can use it to snipe characters, which is phenomenal. The last correction I need to make to some stratagems, you spend 1 CP to give warriors 2-up weapon skill and 3-up ballistic skill. Before I mentioned this, I thought it was just, hey, you can do this in your command phase. It's actually done when you make your list. So it's part of mustering your army. You spend 1 CP while building your army. And it's a permanent 2-up weapon skill, 3-up ballistic skill. So it's really good in the sense that you only have to spend it once at the beginning of the game, essentially, and you have it for the whole game. It's not as good in that you have to choose if you're going to use it for an entire tournament or not. You can't just use it situationally. So I haven't tried the mass warrior spam yet, and I don't know if it's actually really good, but it could be. With warriors having a 5-up invuln, running like 27 of them that all have Death Spitters would be, I think, has some play. Anyways, that's the corrections. Next, I wanted to get to basically some key units that really shine using this Army of Renown. And let's start with the Harridan. I've been playing the Harridan for quite some time, and literally he's just continually gotten better. I was playing him when he cost 3 CP to play, gave up 10 victory points when he died, and had no way to get any buffs of any kind other than Catalyst. And the 5-up invuln with Dermic Symbiosis. Now, he's insane. He can get +1 to hit, exploding 6s to hit, have a 5-up invuln and -1 damage, only costs 1 CP to bring, only gives up 4 victory points when he dies. And, more shenanigans. It's just... he's only gotten infinitely better. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to bring him with this Army of Renown, purely because the rest of the army has to be monsters, and the biggest downside of the Harridan is he can't hold objectives. And if your opponent decides to just ignore the Harridan, and kill, the 4 or 5 other monsters that you bring with the Harridan, then you can't hold any objectives and you lose. And that's been my experience with the last couple GTs that I've brought him to. Basically, my opponent just ignores the Harridan, kills everything else, and leaves me unable to score, and I lose on points, even if I table my opponent, which the Harridan, if he's left alive the entire game, will probably do around turn 5, but by then it's too late. So I think he can basically guarantee you to go 3 and 2, because you're not going to run into every opponent who's able to kill the rest of your list and outscore you. Sometimes the Harridan just absolutely smashes through 3 or 4 key units that your opponent needs, and the Harridan can just delete them by looking at them. And he's really good and kills things that Tyranids would otherwise be unable to kill. But yeah, the restrictions of not being able to run lots of infantry to do objectives with him makes it harder for him to do what he was already weak at. And because of that, I'm not bringing him. I do think he's still very viable, and if they continue buffing him with every release as they've been doing, he's going to win a major eventually. It's going to happen. So obviously he's super good. -1 damage on him is huge. I would still put Dermic Symbiosis on him, because counting as double wounds for bracketing is well worth it on a model that's worth 700 points. So you really want to get max efficiency out of him the entire game. With the -1 damage, you can probably just keep him on the ground and charge every turn, and you still won't die, which is insane. Plus, the hilarity of charging something and getting to roll 34 dice to do mortal wounds. You're guaranteed to do 6 every time. Seems really good. Next up, a key unit, the Trigon Prime. So basically, this guy, I've been contemplating running him with the -1 to wound relic for a while, just to give Hyde Guard the ability to fall back and still shoot with the new Synaptic Link he can take from the first Octarius book. I was toying with it and just didn't want to have him start on the battlefield, because it just feels weird having a Trigon start in your backfield and basically babysit Hyde Guard. But now with -1 damage, he's a real pain to get rid of. If he's -1 to wound, -1 damage, and has a 5-up invuln, he suddenly becomes worth his 195 points that it is to bring him with that Synaptic Link. So if you're running Hyde Guard and worried about them getting tagged, which in this list with this army, you don't have much of a screen to protect your Hyde Guard, I would bring the Trigon Prime with the ability to fall back and shoot, and actually just have him babysit and be that linebacker that anything that comes back to tag your Hyde Guard, he tells them to fall back and still shoot, and then goes and kills whatever, had the audacity to touch them. So Trigon Prime is actually really good. And even if you're not running Hyde Guard, just deep striking in and charging with Adrenal Glands, that 8-inch charge, he hits like a truck. His problem was just he's always been a glass cannon, and now he's not. With 5-up invuln, -1 damage, just super good. Plus, he can give you some much needed synapse in that backfield if you in your opponent's backfield if you deep strike him, which is necessary to make your monsters OBSEC, which will be very key in a lot of your matchups. People forget that you need to be within 12 inches of Synapse in order to give them OBSEC in your command phase. And they just think it's 1 CP become OBSEC. It's not. You do have to be within 12 of Synapse. So deep striking a Trigon Prime in your opponent's backfield can provide that for you if necessary. Next key unit, Carnifexes. I haven't actually tried them yet. I keep building lists with mass Carnifex spam. And then I look at the points and it's so close to being good. But Carnifexes, you give them the Spore Carapace, so they're -1 to hit and shooting. And now having like 13 Carnifexes that are all -1 to hit, 5 up invuln, -1 damage, they become really annoying to shift. And the problem is just their damage output. They don't do anything. Every time I look at it, I'm like, well, for 140 points, I can have this Devourer Carnifex that hits on 3s, or I could just go to like 170 points and have an Exocrine, and that's suddenly toughness 8 and can shoot 12 shots that actually kill things. So that's been my experience, but I do think a mass Carnifex spam list, it's there somewhere. I just haven't found it yet. I'm excited to try it. I just haven't. I've wanted to try other things first. Next up, fast flyers. So Harpies and Crones, probably Harpies, can actually be really funny. I've played 2 games with running 2 Harpies in them, and actually with the Synaptic Link from the Warriors to give them +1 to hit, running 2 heavy Venom Cannons on them with +1 to hit, so they're hitting on 3s. They actually do damage and can pop some transports. I mean, heavy Venom Cannons, I wouldn't really run on anything else. They're just too expensive for what they do. But with the Harpy, they're actually not bad. But what you more take the Harpy for is the fact that he's pretty cheap. He's like 155 points if you're running the Venom Cannons. And he flies 30 inches and then can charge whatever you want to do that Mortal Wound stratagem. So I've played 3 practice games with this Army of Renown now. And the first one was against the Drukhari Thick City list with everything -1 damage. My second game was against the Grey Knight meta list of all Dread Knights and Incursors or Inceptors or whatever in-ers that Space Marines have. And my third game was against the Orc Killrig list that has been coming up in prominence now that they've nerfed all the buggies and flyers. And basically, in my first game against Drukhari, my Harpies flew forward, popped the Raider that Drazar was in, charged Drazar, did 6 mortal wounds to him, and killed him. That already makes the Harpy worth bringing, in my opinion. It was amazing. And I loved doing that to Drazar because, yeah, he's been a thorn in my Tyranid side forever. So being able to just essentially torpedo a dude 30 inches, charge, and do 6 mortal wounds to anything you want, especially or any character you want, I think makes a Harpy worth it. And then, you have the plus side of making a couple Spore Mines. And the Harpy also has his Sonic Screech, so anything that he charges has to fight last. That can combine really well with the rest of your list that is mostly punchy monsters. Making it where you can just tag team, and the Harpy doesn't do much damage, but making everything fight last so your monster can hit whatever it wants without fear of getting hit back is really nice. Next up is Mollocks. So Mollocks and Harpies both can actually kind of do this. The other thing is, again, remember you count as number of models equal to the number of wounds you have remaining. So Harpies can just torpedo 30 inches onto an enemy objective. You give them OBSEC at the beginning of your turn. And you steal your opponent's primary objective away. And Mollocks are also very good at this. You cannot give them OBSEC, unfortunately, the turn they show up, because you need to do that in the command phase. They don't show up until the end of the movement phase. But there's not a lot of OBSEC running around the meta right now. All the top lists are actually running very little OBSEC. You've got the Incursors with the Grey Knights. You've got the Talos and Kronos with the Drukhari. And most armies are only running maybe 2 units of OBSEC, sometimes 3. Other Tyranids being the exception of that. If you're running like the original Octarius Tyranid list that John Lennon just won with, that has plenty of OBSEC. But the Mollock basically can show up 1 inch away on an opponent's objective and count as 12 models and just steal a primary away. And then just do mortal wounds as a bonus. It's pretty fun. I've used that in 3 of my games. And on all 3 of them, he stole the primary away and did some mortal wounds on top. Unfortunately that he died, but at least my opponent had to focus on him. And I mean, guaranteed steal 5 points from your opponent is nothing to scoff at. And if they ignore him and don't deal with him, then he can just move and charge something and do 6 mortal wounds on the charge, which is hilarious. All right. Other key units. Obviously, all the Forge World stuff is just amazing with this. Anything that has 18 wounds suddenly gaining -1 damage is just obscene. So barbed hero duels and scythe hero duels now just are ridiculously hard to kill. Demacarons as well. The Demacarons don't benefit from the 5-up invuln because they already had it. So that's not, it's as much of an improvement, but Demacarons are still very good. Just Forge World stuff, -1 damage, 18 wounds. Stupidly good. And again, everything that counts the number of wounds that you have remaining. When you start at 18, that's a real good place to start. So all the Forge World stuff is amazing and super good, and I'm assuming will be seen a lot at LVO. A lot of people don't like the just Forge World. Some people have biases against it, but it's super good. Final kind of key thing that I noticed is walking Hive Tyrants that just have double Rending Claws. And yes, I said that right. Walking Hive Tyrants with basically no weapons. They're only 155 points. And they basically... So you have your Broodlord is 125 points. And for 30 points more, you now have a Hive Tyrant that hits just as hard, except has an extra psychic power and is way harder to kill. Because he has a 4-up invuln, his toughness 7, and -1 damage. So I think if you're running a Broodlord, I would actually look at just spending 30 points and becoming a walking Hive Tyrant with double Rending Claws. If you're playing this Army of Renown. I've been running 3, so basically I've had Swarmlord with 2 walking Hive Tyrants with Rending Claws just to get all the psychic powers out, because the new psychic powers are great, and just being able to have 6 casts is amazing. So I think that's really good and worth looking at. They're just really hard to kill. They don't do a ton of damage, but you're using all the strats, you're counting as multiple models, and they just stick around. It's great. So things that I've noticed, as I said, I've not tried the Mass Warrior list. I think if you're running the Harridan, probably the Harridan with like 27 warriors that are all buffed up to kill infantry, I think that would be a pretty decent list. I have not tried it yet. I haven't tried the Harridan with the new stuff, but that could very well be a list. The other list that is kind of BS, and I expect to see at least a couple people run at LVO. You have a Spearhead detachment with Swarmlord, 3 units of 3 warriors that all have the bioweapon bond, and then 3 barbed hero duels and 3 scythe hero duels, and that's 1,960 points. So 6 hero duels that all are 18 wounds, 5-up invuln, -1 damage. You have warriors to give all the barbed hero duels, hitting on 2s with their guns, and Swarmlord to double move the scythe hero duels. That list sounds disgusting. If your opponent has a way to quickly remove hero duels, it'll lose, but otherwise that just sounds super gross, and I expect to see that. It's would be a very good list. Would be a lot of resin on the table with all that Forge World. Other lists is as I said, the mass Carnifex spam. So what I was looking at is like a unit of 3 quad Devourer effects to kill all the infantry, 3 Carnifexes that all have double Scything Talons, Old One Eye to give them all, just bonuses and because he fits the theme. If you're running Stone Crusher Carnifexes, you probably want the Bioflails for the extra attacks to kill infantry. Otherwise, yeah, just Mass Carnifex spam would be great. And if you don't take any Synapse creatures or Psychers, then you can take Abhor the Witch. So I think that'd just be kind of a fun list, but is definitely not the top tier version of what you can bring with this Army of Renown. The list that I'm going to try next after playing my 3 games, and what I think is probably one of the most competitive ones, is basically based all around flying monsters, because just having that speed to be able to hit wherever you want, do those mortal wounds on the charge, and just be able to have that board presence and be so super quick. Basically running 2 flying Hive Tyrants, both very punchy. One with the Ignore Invulns relic, the other one with the -1 to wound relic, and Swarmlord to catapult them forward, basically be that turn 1 threat. And then you have your units of 3 units of 3 warriors to fill out your troop choice and give +1 to hit to a whole bunch of things. 2 barbed hero duels being the main beneficiary of those things, because barbed hero duels are just crazy good now. A Haruspex with Murderous Size, because a Haruspex is only 170 points, and having Murderous Size on its Gaping Maw, it gets D3 attacks. The Gaping Maw suddenly becomes Strength 8, AP 2 for D3 +1 damage, and every model that it kills gives an extra attack with the Shoveling Claws. Yeah, he can actually do a lot of damage, especially with the new Psychic power to give him D3 extra attacks, because those D3 extra attacks all become D3 more attacks. So this guy could suddenly turn into having 21 attacks if you were to roll that max, roll the dream there, and then you can even spend 1 CP for reroll all hit rolls, 1 more CP for 6s to hit explode, and this guy suddenly just becomes a absolute blender of anything. Yeah, and then just toughness 8, 13 wounds, an ability to heal, even a wound a turn is really good. Yeah, and then with Acid Blood, the Haruspex is just really good. -1 damage for only 170 points. And then you take 2 Harpies. Again, I explained why the Harpies are good. They can just kind of hang back and fire their Venom Cannons until you are ready to make things fight last or snipe out a character. And yeah, once your opponent makes even a single mistake, the Harpy just flies forward 30 inches and snipes a character by charging in and doing 6 mortal wounds. So having 2 of them in the backfield, trust me, your opponent's not, if they're just hanging out in your zone, your opponent's not going to shoot them, because you have Hero Duels and Flyer Ants and Swarmlord that are much more important to your opponent's mind. So just hang back and fire those Venom Cannons until you're ready to go murder something. And then 3 Lictors, just because for now, until the GT 2022 pack comes out and doesn't allow Lictors to do Engage and Rod. The biggest downside of this list of like the whole Army of Renown is secondaries. Secondaries are very difficult to do with pure monster lists. So having 3 Lictors to do Rod and Engage and basically give you those 2 secondaries for free is really important. And then you can focus on a 3rd secondary, such as Grind Them Down or To the Last would be pretty good. Hyde Guard, honestly, my experience with running this Army of Renown is the Hyde Guard actually aren't worth it. So I know Hyde Guard are all the rage right now and can be buffed up to insane levels of damage and be super good. But with this Army of Renown, you don't really have a screen. You can screen them for the first turn, and then your monsters, move out, and your Hyde Guard are kind of left behind with maybe 1 or 2 babysitters, and your opponent can just find the gaps to be able to tag them and shut your Hyde Guard down. The other downside is your Hyde Guard are just really CP intensive. So 2 CP to double shoot, 1 CP for exploding sixes. All of that's really good. But this list needs those CP to have the mortal wounds on the charge. You want the CP to fight in death with your hero duels at full profile. That's just stupidly good. Yeah, obviously Hyde Guard are good. I'm not going to say they're not. They're insanely good. I just personally basically get 1 turn of use out of them before they get tagged, and they use up 3 CP in that turn, that I end up spending the entire game wishing that I still had that CP. And then especially with the meta being so many things that are -1 damage, such as, if we get the mirror match or fight those Drakari, everything's -1 damage, and Hyde Guard actually do very little against that. So, up to you if you want to bring Hyde Guard or not. I don't think I'm going to. But yeah, that's my thoughts on this army. It's really good. I did lose all 3 practice games, but I was playing around with new lists and fighting very strong opponents who have been playing the top tier meta lists for a while now. And yeah, so I think this list can still do super well, even though I have not won with it yet. I don't think that is the list's fault. I think that is me learning and my opponents being exceptional opponents. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you want more videos. A lot of people asked me to make this one to basically just go over what I think would be a good list. And yeah, I will see you all in the next video, and thanks for watching.